that wriggling, squirming mass that looked like a pile of maggots and made people want to vomit. Who would have thought it was actually the true form of elemental god? The gurgling noises from within sounded like hundreds of earthworms writhing over each other. Po could hear it all clearly, but right now, it had no time to complain. Its mouth was too busy gulping down spiritual energy. The wounds were serious, but Po hadn't given up. Its eyes shone bright with alertness, because the enemy's sharp legs had already lunged forward at a terrifying speed, crashing down all at once. A dozen spider legs stomped and jabbed, trying to crush the ground where Po stood. He stomped like he had a personal grudge against the earth itself, each stomp heavier than the last. His mouth roared madly, spilling curses with every breath. Kill you! Kill you! I'll kill you! With that kind of raging roar and stomping, even the oil bro up above didn't believe Po could survive. The guy quietly whispered to the one holding him, "That's it, it's over. That panda's dead for sure. We better get out of here too." With a bunch of bright red tendrils, Po was wrapped and squeezed tightly. The tendrils overlapped, lifting Po higher and higher, so high it was about to reach the 3 glowing orbs of spirit energy hovering above his head. Seeing the panda helpless, he shrieked with excitement. "This is my most powerful killing move. Prepare for annihilation." Blinding light began to engulf the entire area around Po. Without any signal, the 3 orbs just slammed straight into the panda at the center, all in the blink of an eye. Whether Po screamed or not when he saw it coming, no one could tell, because the deafening explosion from the clashing spirit energy drowned out everything. The destructive force was so great, you could see it with the naked eye. It was enough to turn an entire city to ash, let alone one fat panda. No wonder Elemental God burst into an earth-shaking laugh. He laughed so hard his ha-ha turned into re-re-re. He was loving it, completely absorbed in the scene he pictured in his mind. That arrogant panda, blasted into dust, blown away by the wind. Then, a voice snapped him out of his perfect fantasy. "What the hell are you laughing at?" Even with just part of its face showing, the overwhelming arrogance in Po's expression was crystal clear. Flames were wrapping around him. Not a single trace of that purple-pink spirit energy was landing a hit. Elemental God's soul just about flew out of his body. That heat, it wasn't an illusion, it was real. A blast of power erupted from the very center of Elemental God's spirit energy and sent him flying, causing the surrounding space to ripple violently. Sure enough, Po stood there, totally unfazed, mouth wide open in a grin. "That little attack? Please, that did nothing to me." Po clenched his fists, fur quickly shifting into the color of fire, then lunged forward with a roar. This is what a real attack should look like. A single sweeping strike carried a blaze as vast as the universe, instantly flooding Elemental God's vision with a sea of molten lava. He took Po's attack head-on, flesh and skin sinking inward from the blow. He fell back in agony, screaming as his spider legs shot up toward the sky, his back crashing hard against the ground. The bitter taste of defeat crept into his mind. Elemental God refused to accept it. "No, this can't be happening. I'm the second-ranked god. I've absorbed power from the others. I'm supposed to be unmatched in strength. How is this ugly creature so powerful?" He had just finished cursing Po when the panda came crashing down with a boom. Slamming his fist into the same hole he had punched earlier, came the real fury. "You killed your own wife just to win? You betrayed her. You don't deserve a love that pure. I am going to kill you, scumbag." The moment Po finished speaking, his eyes flared wildly, like it was the male lead in some tragic romance who must protect the true love. Elemental God immediately flailed his spider legs around, trying to land a hit, but couldn't touch Po at all. Po just stood there, calmly channeling spirit energy like it was on an empty field. Driven to madness, the god spat blood and roared, "Even if I die, I'll drag you along with me." "Hey, what's he trying to do?" Longer wanted to know. The way the god was acting, it looked like he was planning to go down in a blaze and take Po with him. Of course Po knew. Standing right on top of Elemental God, how could he not notice? He didn't say a word, didn't even flinch, while Elemental God screamed his lungs out beneath him. "You can beg, and I still won't spare you." "Ah!" Mid-laugh, Elemental God suddenly noticed. Po wasn't even looking at him. "What's with that look in your eyes?" Po just looked down on it too much to bother replying. "You think you're winning by killing yourself? That's something to be proud of? A god who has to rely on self-destruction to claim victory? Really?" Po's voice was calm, but to Elemental God, it landed like the worst insult in existence. He shrieked, no longer caring about being a god. "So what? Gods don't need to be lectured. Gods must win. Just the fact that someone as ugly as you could push me this far, that's already the greatest honor of your pathetic life." His belly burst open with massive holes, spirit energy blasting out in all directions as his laughter turned sharp and high-pitched. Take this honor with you and stay on this planet forever. The spirit energy flared right in his own face, probably the most ecstatic death of any god that had recently checked out. Up above, Longer had clearly seen this psycho go into self-destruct mode, and yet he was still hanging around, watching like it was a street show. Not until the spirit energy nearly swallowed him whole did he finally panic and drag the oil brother off to escape. No one knew if those wings of his could get both of them out in time, because Elemental God's explosion was 4 times more powerful than his earlier energy blast. Even the outer edge of it was enough to make everything disappear instantly. It felt like space itself was warping. Shards of metal scattered wildly, vanishing just as fast as if they'd evaporated into thin air. An entire city, gone in the blink of an eye. The blinding light could destroy anyone's vision, and Elemental God's self-destruction didn't just end there. It exploded 3, 4 more times, each blast bigger, the destruction spreading wider. Now Longer regretted not leaving sooner. If they died right now, it would have been his damn curiosity. He grit his teeth, holding on against the overwhelming force, without knowing that the spirit energy still had one more explosion left. Finally, after another massive tremor, everything stopped. As the smoke started to thin out, Longer could make out the centipede-like head of the god, still sizzling and smoking. A leg stomped down hard as it approached, as if to shout, "Guess what? I'm still alive, suckers!" From behind the lingering smoke, a very familiar eye glinted through. It was Poe, dragging one of Elemental God's giant legs, and with it, hauling that massive head along like a sack of trash. At last, Longer could shout out in joy. Clearly, what Poe was hauling back was its hard-earned trophy. Now it was time for him to continue his journey to find out where his little brother was. Meanwhile, in a neighboring city, an intense fight was raging atop a dark spire. A god with a grotesque, flamboyant figure was grinning ear to ear because his enemy was gravely injured. Qingjiao, once one with the earth and sand, now had a massive hole through his gut. He couldn't heal like before. No wonder this god was laughing like a maniac. "Looks like you two can't hold out much longer, huh? Allow me to send you off." From his many eyes, 2 spheres of spirit energy began to charge, growing larger and brighter. The light was so intense, it seemed to suck all color out of the world. Everything went dark, making the glowing path of the twin blasts that pierced through Qingjiao and Langfeng all the more vivid. Was this really how it ended with them? Langfeng turned his eyes to his brother, a comrade in arms from long before they bowed to the misty mountain. Now, he looked exactly like him, torn open on one side. That stunned expression in Langfeng's eyes. What a beautiful scene it was, to the twisted god. But then, something felt off. Wait a second, those were just shadows and dust? The shock remained frozen on their faces, but the bodies, they weren't real. A deadly aura flared up behind him. The god spun sharply to the left, only to see a pitch-black shadow surging toward him. And from the right, a massive chunk of earth rocketed in at blinding speed. By the time he realized it was Qingjiao, Langfeng had already shouted, "Execution Knight!" Darkness surged forward with his outstretched arm, instantly transforming into a massive monster that roared as it lunged for the enemy. Without hesitation, Qingjiao roared too, "Raging Giant!" The sand hardened into solid rock, and sharp spikes erupted from his muscular arms. Together, they came crashing down on the god in perfect harmony, a double assault from both sides. But even though their attacks were swift and precise, 2 force fields burst out of nowhere and blocked both blows. Qingjiao clenched his teeth, while his comrade looked ready to explode with rage. "Damn it all!" Langfeng roared in fury. Never before had he lost control like this. Their expressions only made the god feel more pleased with himself. He chuckled while putting on a smug, superior tone. "Not bad, those 2 moves. Definitely stronger than your last ones." Langfeng wasn't going to let him say whatever he wanted. Even coughing up blood, he would give everything he had to take this thing down. Phantom Execution Knight. Darkness surged and twisted, then it was pulled into Langfeng. His face darkened, and his skin turned jet black. His whole form changed, no longer human, now resembling a twisted mirror of the darkness himself. The god's face froze. What the hell? It was like staring at his own ghost. The Phantom Execution Knight's energy stormed in like a fierce wind, forcing the god to stumble backward. But the moment he saw Langfeng, teeth clenched, eyes blazing with hate, charging straight for him, he couldn't stop that smug mouth of his from curling open. Ha! His life force is dropping fast, finally using everything he's got. Huh? Now this is a real fight. Yes, true battle means betting your very life. He laughed like a man possessed. Meanwhile, Lang Feng's Phantom Knight unleashed a swarm of shadow creatures, all lunging from the darkness. Then, with razor-sharp fingers, the Phantom charged at high speed, straight for the god's face, aiming for the jaw in a surprise uppercut move. Its thumb slipped between the god's teeth, then spikes erupted in reverse, stabbing all throughout the god's body from the inside. But it didn't stop there. Lang Feng pushed further. Ultimate shadow execution. The darkness flooded into the god's mouth and transformed into jagged spikes, stabbing relentlessly into his face. The god coughed violently, completely gagged, unable to spew any more nonsense. But that still wasn't enough to kill him. Lang Feng saw it clearly. His life force hadn't dropped at all. The blood pouring from his own mouth was real. The god might have been choking and sputtering, but he wasn't actually hurt. A furious roar echoed through the air, Lang Feng's rage reaching its peak. He poured more power into the shadow execution, unleashing another wave of brutal spikes that stabbed with sickening crunches into every corner they could reach. Pitch-black darkness surged from his arm, gathering above his head. It formed into a massive, deadly shape, like a giant axe blade gleaming with sharp edges, connected to a small, compact handle. The darkness under Lang Feng's control was sharper and more fluid than ever. The power being poured into it was staggering, like he'd never pushed himself this far before. Die already! Whoosh! The axe blade, guided by its master's arm, slammed straight into the god's face with a loud crack. It felt like it had buried itself deep into his skull. But the god was still resisting. Not enough. Still not enough. Lang Feng strained every muscle to keep the shadow grip tight around the god, while shouting for Qingzhao. Then, a flare of spirit energy erupted behind the god, drawing his attention. Since when had so much dust and sand gathered in the sky? And when had it all condensed into a razor-sharp drill tip, hovering right above the god's head? He was completely pinned, exactly the moment Qingzhao had been waiting for. With a thrust of his hand, the spinning sand drill roared downward, slamming toward the enemy's skull with a force as sharp as it was heavy, like a mountain dropped through a needlepoint. The drill hit the ground with a deafening impact, sending dust and debris billowing in every direction. But it didn't stop. It kept grinding, twisting harder and deeper into whatever was resisting inside that cloud of chaos. It had to finish the job, crush him completely. Did we win? Both Qingzhao and Lang Feng stood in silence behind the veil of dust, waiting. Qingzhao didn't dare answer. Roared from inside the dust, a jagged chunk of a grotesque centipede-like body came bursting out. Elemental God wasn't just alive. He launched a surprise attack. A blast of spirit energy shot straight into Lang Feng's chest. He hadn't even activated his transformation, so the strike instantly blew off one of his arms. It happened too fast. Blood exploded in midair before Qingzhao's reflexes could even register what had occurred. Luckily, he managed to catch his friend in a swirl of sand before Lang Feng hit the ground. But he couldn't understand it. Why hadn't Lang Feng activated his shadow defense? Normally, even in surprise attacks, the power of darkness would automatically protect him. That's how it always worked. Around the god, glowing orbs hovered ominously while he chuckled darkly. Why couldn't he activate his elemental power? You're wondering that, huh? I'm Elemental God. If I want, I can devour your energy. Your coordination had no weaknesses, but to me, not too much. All the spirit orbs converged into one massive bomb of light, ready to come crashing down and obliterate both Qingzhao and his brother-in-arms, when suddenly, a crack tore through space out of nowhere. From that crack in space leapt an elephant, throwing its body into the path of the blast. Who the hell was that? The god's many eyes bulged in disbelief. When had this one shown up? Even Qingzhao was stunned to see Glacier here. How could the god have predicted it? Lang Feng, meanwhile, was coughing blood like his lungs were about to come out. He was in no shape to care about anything anymore. The tide of battle had shifted so drastically, it was hard to believe. Glacier, missing all this time, had suddenly appeared, now standing face to face with one of the strongest gods. His eyes glared fiercely at this new enemy, as if declaring, "This fight is mine." At that time, over in City 2, the Man Tribe had joined forces with the Steel Knights, launching wave after wave of attacks against the remaining demonic beasts. Each wave was coordinated, relentless. Several Transcendents teamed up on a single beast, but with one tail swipe, it sent them all flying into the air and crashing into distant corners. This creature looked like ancient crocodile, but it wasn't. It was one of the last remaining demonic beasts, actively hunting down soldiers. They had to gather more reinforcements fast, cut out the beast's core crystals, or else these monsters would regenerate in no time. After countless battles, bodies were strewn everywhere. The gods that had been dispatched, dead. High in the sky, dream gods silently appeared to assess the situation. Her expression turned to one of utter disbelief. Both gods that were sent here, completely wiped out. Out of nowhere, a sharp clang echoed through the air as a space rift tore open right beside the dream god. She jolted, startled to the bone. The newcomer stomped down hard, its massive legs slamming into the earth, its skin color in stark contrast to the land around it. It was Kuijo, the dinosaur among the 10 great beasts of Misty Mountain. What horrified the dream god most wasn't just its appearance, but how it had shown up right behind her without her even realizing. No greetings, no hesitation. Kuijo lunged forward with razor-sharp jaws. It wasn't clear what part of her it bit down on, but the impact kicked up so much dust it nearly blinded everything in sight. A new battle had begun. Back at Glacier's side, things were relatively quieter. Both sides had fallen into a tense silence, sizing each other up. To Elemental God, this was just another new face. So what? The spiritual pressure it gave off was nothing special. He had already held off 2 opponents alone. What's one more? Glacier, currently a peak rank 4 transcendent, was only a small step from breaking into rank 5. But Elemental God was no fool. His tactics and schemes were far from ordinary. Careful, that one's dangerous, Qingzhao shouted. When it came to battlefield caution, Glacier was one of the best. He never underestimated an opponent. His red eyes flickered with a calculating glint. No one knew why he had appeared on this battlefield at this very moment, but one thing was clear. Whoever Glacier was here to fight wasn't going to be easy. His body was cloaked in layer upon layer of overwhelming spirit energy. This bastard, he was far stronger than the other gods. More importantly, he was in an entirely different class from Glacier. Elemental God was currently a mid-stage rank 5 transcendent. Just going from peak rank 4 to early rank 5 was already like crossing an entire sky, but mid-stage? That was another leap altogether. For a fleeting moment, doubt crept in. A memory of Golden Dragon flashed through Glacier's mind, when that dragon mocked him for being too weak. Are you really one of the 10 great beasts? That battle ended in humiliating defeat. Total disgrace. Thrown aside like trash. Now, standing face to face with an enemy even stronger than Golden Dragon, Glacier couldn't help but ask himself, will I be able to win? The god grew impatient, staring back at the elephant that just glared at him without moving. You're just gonna stare? Then I'll come to you, little toy. The declaration had barely left his lips when both sides charged straight at each other. Glacier lowered his head slightly, focused his power into a brutal charge, reinforcing the armor on his forehead, and rammed it directly into Elemental God's rock-hard skull. Even Lengfeng's axe only managed to pierce a little, so the sheer force of this head-on collision was like a bomb going off. Glacier's legs slid backward, unable to withstand the recoil of the impact. Fragments of his head armor shattered and scattered through the air, right in front of Elemental God's eyes. He burst out laughing. You seriously call that power? You're one of the 10 great beasts? Your strength doesn't even come close to those 2. Drenched in arrogance, Elemental God fired a barrage of spirit energy beams directly at Glacier. With his armor broken, his body was left wide open. The blasts tore into him like spears. The elephant roared in agony, stumbling backward, then collapsing with a thunderous crash. Qingzhao lunged forward immediately, trying to use sand to seal the bleeding wounds, but Elemental God sent a warning shot that forced him back. Just one simple strike, yet it made Qingzhao cough up blood on the spot. The power gap was beyond imagination. He couldn't even get close to help. He hit the ground hard, barely conscious. Quit getting in the way, the god sneered. I'm tired of playing with you lot. Now, I've got a new toy. But before he could finish that sentence, Glacier sprang back up, eyes burning with fury. Blood poured from 2 deep gashes across his forehead, but the elephant didn't seem to feel pain at all. He leapt high into the air. Brute force. All 4 legs glowed with lightning-infused elemental energy, toughened and deadly. He slammed them down with all his might, aiming squarely at the god's head. The impact looked powerful, until Glacier noticed something was wrong. Instead of crushing his opponent, he found himself stopped cold. Elemental God had summoned a shield of pure elemental force. The lightning-infused power was completely nullified. The sheer weight of an elephant's body did nothing to him. As Glacier froze for just a second, when his belly was pierced straight by a razor-sharp pillar shot up from beneath that came from the god's mouth. The attack missed the heart. Elemental God paused, slightly confused. That massive spirit pillar, and it hadn't hit the heart? He shot forward again, surrounding Glacier from all sides. Spirit energy surged in waves as he activated Soul Bite, a vicious technique meant to tear through flesh and pierce straight into the heart. But Glacier wasn't defenseless. Thick fur. All over his body, his fur suddenly grew longer, reaching down to his legs, enveloping him entirely like a thick, layered shield. The hair wrapped tight, shielding his entire form from every direction. What kind of technique is this? Seriously? The god scoffed. Ha! Interesting. I love meat, and I've eaten everything. The expanded mane made Glacier stand several meters taller. To opponents of the same rank, it could be terrifying, but to this god, already leagues ahead, it was laughable. He let out a shrill, mocking laugh. I've simply never eaten elephant before. Come on, just let me have one bite. He really did sink his teeth into Glacier's thick coat, tearing through the fur with a sickening crunch. Blood spurted everywhere. Pain flashed violently in the elephant's eyes. Glacier screamed, jerking his body, trying to pull free. Rip! A horrible tearing sound echoed out. Elemental God yanked free a massive clump of fur, still attached to a chunk of meat from Glacier's side. Blood dripped freely from it, a grotesque, horrifying sight. Once, after that humiliating defeat to Golden Dragon, Glacier returned to Misty Mountain. He was large, but his steps were quiet, subdued. It was only when he drew close that Zhu Yizu realized it was him. He hadn't summoned Glacier, and this elephant was never the chatty type. What's the matter? Zhu Yizu asked plainly. Master, Glacier replied, I would like to withdraw myself from the 10 great beasts. Zuz didn't understand, but then the realization hit. The news of the fight with Golden Dragon had reached him. Master, please, erase my name. Now, as that fresh chunk of his flesh dangled from the god's mouth, Glacier couldn't shake the memory of that day. The shame, the sting of failure. Elemental God chewed noisily, chomp chomp, blood running down his lips as he mocked. Too weak, far too weak. He swallowed it whole. His throat bulged, writhing like a snake devouring its prey. Ha! Just as I thought. The weak taste delicious. Come on now, let me have another bite. No matter how docile an elephant may seem, there were limits. Celestial Tusk Breaker. Glacier charged, his long tusks glowing, reinforced with terrifying power. He rammed them straight into Elemental God's torso. Blood spurted out immediately. He immediately realized with panic in the eyes, the enemy had already moved, fast as lightning, and now his jaws had clamped down again, this time on another part of his flesh. Useless, the god growled, teeth clamped as he tried to tear free another bloody piece. With a brutal jerk, Glacier pulled away, letting the blood gush freely while heard it clearly. Gulp, gulp, gulp. The god chewed and swallowed the second piece of flesh like it was a delicacy. Delicious. I can't wait for the next bite. He lunged forward again. If he managed to take one more bite, there was a real chance he could devour Glacier whole. But suddenly, a surge of green spirit energy erupted, blasting upward in a towering column that enveloped Glacier completely. Elemental God recoiled, visibly stunned. That weakling still has fight left? Glacier's gaze had changed again. Those eyes now burned with the same murderous glint as before. This time, though, it wasn't just a look. His spirit energy was rising rapidly. Elemental God didn't dare charge in recklessly like before. He realized now, this elephant had been hiding its true strength all along. Glacier's spirit energy was overflowing, flowing into his wounds, patching the bleeding holes across his massive body. He was forcing every ounce of strength he had into one last push, and in the middle of it all, memories surfaced. Master, I'm too weak. I am not talented like Ninetails, nor do I possess speed and power like Flash. I also don't possess abnormal insight like Thorn. I'm too slow, too clumsy. In battle, I'll only hold everyone back. No matter how hard I try, I'll never catch up to them. Before he could finish, Ziyu cut in sharply. Enough. 8. The 10 great beasts are unique and irreplaceable. Zhu Yizu's cold, piercing gaze silenced him completely. Glacier opened his mouth, wanting to argue, but no words came. Is it shame you're feeling? Zhu Yizu asked. Because you hold a high position, yet your skills can't compare? If you leave the 10 beasts, do you plan to never grow stronger again? I understand the confusion in your heart, but backing down like this, that's what truly betrays those who trust you. For Ziyuzi, Glacier hadn't lacked power. He'd only lacked belief. Can I really become stronger? He had asked. Zhu Yizu had responded with something unexpected. Have you prepared yourself to die? And now, bathed in this blinding pillar of spirit energy, Glacier had a very clear answer. I am not going to die here. I'll defeat you, then bring Qingjiao and Lengfeng back. Such a simple, almost childish wish, and yet it infuriated Elemental God. You think I'll let you do that? He roared in rage, only to have the light column slam into his face. But it wasn't Glacier's energy. This light was enhancing the god's own power. It was a transfer, the energy of number 2, now flowing into Elemental God. He died too. Only number 1 and number 6 are still alive right now. The god roared cheerful. On the outskirts of the battlefield, Qingjiao lay flat on the ground, unable to get up. Even so, he could clearly sense it. The enemy had grown stronger again. Glacier, the gentle giant, was all alone now. The more his power grew, the more the pain from his injuries intensified. It was obvious. He was going all in. Elemental God narrowed his eyes, growing cautious. So this is it, huh? Your companions are all extremely powerful, and you think just you can take me down? Without a word, Glacier shot forward in a brutal, lightning-fast burst. The move was short, simple, and absolutely savage. His speed caught Elemental God completely off guard. He had no time to dodge. All he could do was raise his elemental shield, forged from a composite of multiple elements and known for its overwhelming durability. Yet the moment Glacier's tusks slammed into it, it shattered like cheap glass from a knockoff store. Then came the stomp. One massive elephant leg drove straight into the god's face before he could even comprehend what was happening. He had been weak just moments ago. So why? Why was his strength suddenly surging like this? Even before the full stomp landed, Glacier's unleashed power was already devastating the landscape, his spirit energy flooding outward like a dam bursting. He roared again and again, the sound shaking the skies as his energy blasted down from the top of the spire, cracking the ground into deep, jagged fissures. The crushing sound of stone grinding against stone echoed like thunder as the black stone pillar, once thought unbreakable, splintered into massive chunks, falling in a storm of debris. The entire region trembled under the force. There wasn't a single living thing nearby that could survive such a quake. The entire black spire had collapsed from just one attack. Elemental God rose from the rubble, dazed, not even sure what had just hit him. Far in the distance, the silhouette of Glacier loomed. The murderous gleam in his eyes was gone, but the aura around him now was even more terrifying. The crumbling pillar crushed buildings beneath it like paper. Caught inside the fall were Qingjiao and Langfeng, dragged down along with it. They shot downward like missiles, the black chunks threatening to crush them midair before they even touched the ground. But at that exact moment, snap, snap, two red vines whipped out, catching them both and yanking them away just in time. Got him! Thorn exhaled sharply, panic still written all over her face. She'd made it just in time. Now, aside from the rain of falling debris, only two figures still stood amidst the devastation, both locked in a ferocious face-off, roaring like wild beasts. Glacier let out a long, thunderous elephant trumpet, his lone cry echoing through the broken battlefield. Come on! Elemental God roared in challenge. Now the real fight begins. Fine by him. Glacier didn't flinch. He wasn't afraid. Heavenly Tusk. His tusks lit up like twin spotlights, blazing bright. He flung his head upward, vwhew, and both tusks launched outward like spears. It was a ranged technique known as the tusk strike, designed to converge at the perfect angle just before hitting the target. The tusks closed in, perfectly aligning to match the god's size as they neared. Seeing this, Elemental God responded instantly. Streams of spirit energy, glowing blue wrapped in black, erupted from his body. He called it Light of the God. They gathered into a powerful force and clashed with the twin tusks, meeting head-on in a blinding explosion of energy. Both attacks canceled each other out in midair, but there was no time to pause. From behind the fading shockwaves, the two warriors launched themselves forward, colliding again. Glacier had no more armor on his head, but he didn't care. He didn't fear testing whose skull was harder, and this time, he won. He barreled straight through, headbutting Elemental God so hard, it sent him crashing into the buildings behind them like a rag doll. Boom, boom, boom. Pure, unrestrained brute force. The god was left battered, smashed into the wreckage like a soaked rag. He never expected Glacier to have such a wide arsenal of techniques, and now he was learning the hard way. His body was completely shattered. He wanted to try regenerating it a few more times, but this time it was harder than he thought. Glacier was still as powerful as ever. His front foot erupted with blazing flames, the same brutal stomp technique from earlier. But this time, its power was on another level. Houses and rocks crushed beneath his feet. How could that god survive, especially now when he couldn't dodge or even raise his shield to defend? He floated in midair, yet those two eyes still seemed to be staring intensely. Glacier was panting heavily, nearly out of breath. Then suddenly, it noticed something floating toward it. Those little flames lit up with an eerie glow. Before Glacier could run, they exploded all at once, like a rain of bombs crashing down. The poor elephant screamed in pain. His whole body was already covered in wounds, and now, with explosions like that, how could his skin possibly endure? He charged out of the smoke in a panic, only to see Elemental God had already formed part of his body again and was grinning mockingly at it. Ha ha! That wasn't just a bombing. I also infused a corrosive force into your body. Glacier's skin was severely burned, chunks of it peeled off, revealing the raw flesh underneath. But those narrowed eyes proved he hadn't backed down one bit, and that deeply unsettled Elemental God. This body of his couldn't heal himself. The last few attacks had caused serious damage. Even if he wasn't dead yet, if he couldn't unleash more techniques, he was done for. If this fight dragged on, he'd lose his life for sure. He had to finish it quickly. Though fear crept into his heart, Elemental God dared not show it. On the outside, he just screamed with excitement, pretending he had the upper hand. "Now I'll finish you!" A series of multicolored orbs appeared in a ring around Elemental God. They were elemental lights, one of his most powerful techniques. This is the power fused from all 8 great elemental forces. With this move, I'll blow you to pieces. He hadn't even finished his declaration when Glacier's tusks suddenly lunged at him, smashing right into the centipede part of his lower body. The collision was fierce enough to spark fire. Elemental God was thrown into chaos, his top priority now being to protect whatever remained of his mangled body. You're willing to throw your life away just to fight me?" Seeing Glacier had no intention of stopping, Elemental God began to panic. An attack from such a close distance, even I will be affected. But if I don't do this, I will die here for sure. Fine, let's see whose life is tougher. Elemental God gathered all his remaining power right before his eyes. All the elemental forces converged into a blinding white screen, forming right in front of Glacier. These were beautiful bombs, deadly and absolute. They exploded one after another, booming non-stop. The shockwaves were so intense that even Thorn didn't dare approach. Even from nearly a kilometer away, she had to use vines to shield herself. How could Glacier possibly withstand that? Her heart was filled with worry. After the onslaught, the ground had sunken several meters deep. Thick black dust choked the entire sky. Elemental God had survived, but just barely. He stood on the brink of death, so fragile it felt like even a breeze could blow him away. So now, what could possibly surprise him anymore? It was Glacier. At that moment, Glacier was encased in a sphere of brilliant light. Burn marks were clearly visible on its skin, but the elephant hadn't died. He still stood firm. No one knew what technique he had used, but it seemed like Glacier had poured nearly all his remaining strength into protecting himself. "Master, can I really do this?" Back then, Zuz didn't say yes or no. Instead, he showed Glacier something nestled among the interwoven dry branches. "This is my tree core. It is also my heart. I will replace your heart with this one. Before that, I'll drain all your blood, and the tree heart will give you new blood. But the process will be excruciating. If you can't endure it, you might die. But if you survive, you will obtain a new life through this." Glacier knew then it had to choose, a decision that could send it straight to hell. And now, covered in wounds, its voice sounded faint but unwavering. "It's not over yet. I want to grow stronger, then win again, no matter who the enemy is," it roared, baffling Elemental God. Glacier raised both front legs, a thin layer of spiritual energy cloaking them. The light radiating from that energy made its figure look fiercer than ever before. "I won't lose again either," it growled and slammed both feet down onto the god, just like crushing a cockroach cornered in a cabinet. Elemental God sputtered, then burst into wild, crazed laughter. Yes, that's it. That's how it should be. Now this is fun." This time, it wasn't just its legs. Glacier's whole body lifted into the air. Spiritual energy wrapped around it entirely, gathering into a devastating force descending from above. The whole area erupted again. This time, it was different. Everything within the impact zone was reduced to ash. Glacier's pillar of spiritual energy shot up to the sky, its light illuminating the jagged, broken buildings around it. Later, when the smoke finally cleared, the ground was pitted like a honeycomb. Thorn saw things quiet down and was about to head in to check. A sea of thick dust clouded the air. Just breathing it made you cough. There wasn't a trace of the god's energy left. "We won!" Thorn gasped when she saw Glacier's firm, muscular end. If Elemental God were still alive, Glacier wouldn't be able to stand like that. The elephant looked like a completely different beast now. Most of its skin had peeled off. The burns were so severe, even blood wouldn't flow and vision was shaky. Then, with a heavy thud, he collapsed onto the ground. But in his heart, there was joy. "Master!" Glacier wanted to rush back to Misty Mountain and show the divine tree that it hadn't brought shame upon him. The sky, once pitch black, slowly parted on both sides, revealing the golden rays of sunset, as if a brighter future awaited this elephant warrior. Thud, a dark-colored claw stomped down right in front of Glacier. It was a pack of remaining demon beasts dashed in for one last grab. Their eyes gleamed with hunger as they stared at the wounded Rank 4 beast, barely clinging to life. Thorn panicked. She flung her vine forward in desperation to save Glacier. Danger was close, but Glacier couldn't move on his own. His body refused to respond. Thorn was racing toward him at full speed, fearing even a moment's delay would mean those demon beasts would tear him apart. but it looked like she wouldn't make it in time. They were too close. Out of nowhere, a streak of light flashed by, and 3 demon beasts were instantly beheaded. Their heads thudded heavily to the ground right next to Glacier. Who could be faster than even Thorn? Only one being could move at that speed. Tiny, terrifyingly powerful. That golden leg was unmistakable. It was Flash! The little ant had arrived at some point, spreading its arms wide to shield Glacier. And she wasn't alone. That divine-like presence, moving from city to city, saving those hanging on the edge of death. The battle in City 2 was over. But at the central zone, things were just beginning for Lava Dragon. You think you can eat me that easily? Lava Dragon's form was unleashed, ready to face off with the Dream God. She floated like a drifting cloud, impossible to lock onto. She unleashed a psychic illusion attack, striking straight at the mind. A veil of purple mist immediately cloaked the area around Lava Dragon. Before anyone could even tell how she was attacking, Dream God suddenly felt a force crash down upon her. It was Elemental God's energy. Had he died too? She was stunned. Looking up at the energy orb above, out of the 12 gods, only she remained now. This is a mess. I need to properly put an end to everything. I'm going to settle this in one go. I will avenge everyone. Her beautiful eyes burned with hatred that she couldn't realize from behind. A blood-red dragon's head burst out of a rift in space and clamped down on the Dream God's head. It looked like she had no solid form, but somehow bit down effortlessly. Black Dragon, what are you doing? This was the dragon who had once betrayed Dragon Island to serve the gods. Now, it had turned on them. Your continuous failures have enraged the Supreme Lord. Just one sentence, and the Dream God was silenced. Black Dragon didn't emerge from the rift. Instead, he retreated back into it, dragging the Dream God along. In a flash, both vanished from the sky. Brother Nine stood frozen. He'd expected another earth-shaking battle, and yet they just retreated? He was about to lie down for a nap when an overwhelming surge of evil energy rushed toward him. Holy crap, there's still a whole pile of terrifying dark energy left. He braced for a new villain, until he realized this villain felt oddly familiar. Immediately shut down his battle mode, Wine Deity's stubby legs were just lifting to run when he got yanked backward. This time, let's see where you think you're running off to, Poe's voice screamed out, followed by Bro Nine's begging cries. Come on, I was wrong, okay? Just borrowed a little. I'll pay back with interest. The two brothers bickered below, while Oil Guy up above wondered aloud, when are we finally gonna land? My armpits are about to fall off. In the central city, Yule thought he'd have to fight to his last breath. But then the enemies all just ran off? There was no way it could be that simple. Back on the Blossom Federation's battlefield, infernal flames surged like hellfire. It was a familiar heat, now burning everything left in the aftermath. The super beings stared speechlessly at the roaring fire for a full hour. The monster couldn't escape, shrieked so loudly it gave them all headaches. What the hell will it take to burn this thing to death? The one behind the flames, Xiaoling, stood silently, thinking about a way to shut that monster up for good. A figure tore through space, emerging without a care for the transcendence below. It's a dragon! The Iron Cavalier shouted and pointed. That's no ally dragon! Black Dragon and the Dream God instantly recognized the one writhing in the sea of magma was the number one of the 12 gods. Xiaoling didn't recognize the dragon, the pink creature beside him that was one of the gods who had once lived with the ancient tree of life. What were they planning? Surely they wouldn't jump in themselves to save an ally? Something slammed out of the sky, crashing into the ground not far from Xiaolin. The very air tightened as the Lord appeared, his eyes locked onto the sight of his subordinate burning alive. His enormous form could overshadow an entire city below. His gaze swept over the crowd gathered around the frigid flames, so cold it made people's hearts skip a beat. His size was monstrous. Before they could decide what to do, the Lord's tail whipped up. He was trying to rescue that god. His tail slammed into the ground just behind the number one god. Xiaoling's fire immediately parted in both directions. Without a target to burn, the flames scattered uselessly, a testament to the sheer power of the blow. Even with their master present, the flames didn't dare reform. Xiaoling was completely stunned. My flames dispersed just like that? The rescued god looked utterly wrecked. His skin was scorched black like charcoal. He stood motionless, as if ready to exact revenge, sending chills down every transcendent's spine. It had been hard enough to deal with just one god. Now there was a dragon, a twisted, mangled god. And worst of all, this terrifying new being with overwhelming energy. The ground trembled. Something below was churning. Everyone could see those was massive tree roots. The super beings might think mutant tree were coming, but it was him. Xiaoling would have been the first to smile. She quickly realized this wasn't her master's energy. It was the ancient tree of life. The tree of life wrapped his roots around the battered number one god, as if trying to protect him. Above them were all his allied facing the super beings. They lost their spirit quickly. Some couldn't take it anymore. One immediately turned and ran. I don't want to die. I want to go back to Earth. That made him become the first target. The tree of life blasted a beam of intense energy, complete with cremation services, tossing in a free trench for the gravestone afterward. With frightening ease, it vaporized the fleeing transcendent and sent a clear warning to all the others. Everyone fell silent. No one dared move their toes. My lord, the number one god called out weakly. All he got in return was a disdainful glance from the lord. I gave you the strongest power, and now look at you. Pathetic. The god dropped to his knees, begging desperately, Master, give me one more chance. But the answer was firm and cold. Not needed anymore. He didn't even glance at him when 3 hardened roots stabbed straight into the number one god right in front of Xiaoling. What was happening? He wasn't killed, but drained the power to be exact. The god creamed in agony, but no one cared. The one he had loyally served merely said with icy indifference, I'm taking back the power I gave you. The roots lit up with a ghastly glow. Energy surged backward through them with sickening gurgles, until the number one god was reduced to nothing but a drifting strand of light, which the Lord slowly absorbed into himself. Black Dragon, the Lord barked. With that, Black Dragon lunged forward and clamped his jaws around Dream God. If the number one was executed, what hope was there for number 6? She thrashed in panic. Wait, Master, I am still useful. Black Dragon stared at her with cold eyes. Life and death are predestined. Don't blame me. Then he clenched his jaw, crushed her like an eggshell. On the outside, Xiaoling stayed calm, but inside, she was horrified. In just moments, 2 gods were eliminated completely. The Lord looked down at her group like they were insects. To struggle this much against weaklings like humans, you call yourselves gods? Without warning, the roots lunged toward Xiaoling in a blur. She screamed to the human, "Get out of the way!" But it was too late when an entire squad of transcendents behind her were caught in the roots like prey in a serpent's coils. They struggled with everything they had, but it was useless. Even Xiaoling became a target. Her physique of flames flared up, turning her into a living torch that broke the roots in half. The others watched helplessly as they were dragged away, looking at Xiaolin as their last hope. As they were all pulled forward, it became clear that this ancient white tree was trying to devour them all. The tree of life stuffed every last transcendent into the crevice beneath its red eye. None escaped. Then Black Dragon opened his mouth, launched a massive blast of spiritual energy to Xiaoling, who was the last one standing. The pillar of power came crashing down, but it couldn't extinguish her flames. Her defense was so airtight that the attack felt like water on a rock. Then came the enhanced roots, sped forward like bolts of lightning. Only when they were almost upon her did Xiaoling realize it. They slammed into her defenses, pressing her down, trying to shatter her protective sphere like a brittle bubble. Another root struck from the opposite side, aimed straight at her back. One above, one below, pounding furiously, as if to crush her into dust. Dust clouds rose layer by layer, and for a moment it looked like her flame sphere had been obliterated. But then a streak of light shot skyward at blinding speed. Xiaoling, covered in injuries, roared through clenched teeth. You're the cause of all this. As long as we kill you, everything will come to an end. She charged forward, only to slam into a solid root. The tree of life blocked her path, his glowing eye glaring as if to say, "Don't you dare touch my lord." From the left, a massive dragon maw lunged in, a perfect chomp, aimed right where Xiaoling stood. Between the sharp teeth, hundreds of flame butterflies erupted. It was too deadly hot that the dragon instantly spat Xiaoling out. But waiting for her was a barrage of needle-like roots flying in from all directions. She was surrounded. Even she could feel escape was unlikely. The tree of life, despite its ancient appearance, acted with ruthless cunning. He wasn't just after her body, but he was hunting her powerful soul. Just when it seemed like the end, a tornado of fire whipped through the air, striking the roots and freeing Xiaoling in an instant. This flame, so familiar. There were a few flame users in Misty Mountain, but only one had such a dazzling, fiery tail. 9 tails. The eldest sister stood tall, holding a glowing ball of fire in her mouth, ready to blast it at anyone threatening Xiaoling. Another ally shows up? The tree of life became visibly more alert, but its tone remained full of scorn. That spiritual power wasn't weak. In fact, compared to those before, it was stronger than even the so-called gods. The black dragon tried to chime in to only anger 9 tails even more. Her strength wasn't something for them to chatter about, especially not while they were trying to trap Xiaoling. It was rare to see Ninetails truly enraged. Her entire body burst into roaring flames, becoming a blazing inferno. It was one of her forbidden techniques, because each second she used it burned thousands of spiritual points. The pressure from her overwhelming energy suffocated the entire battlefield. No one dared act rashly. Her form at that moment put everyone on high alert. A massive flaming fox surrounded her, announcing to all she was ready to burn them all down. "Back off! None of you are her match." The Lord stepped forward to take control, but Ninetails didn't care who was master or servant. Whoever came would be crushed by her. She opened the fight with a colossal surge of spiritual flame, slamming it forward with brute force, only to be met by the Lord's magical shield. The shield's form rippled like sound waves, thin and ethereal, but when it collided with Ninetails' fire pillar, the resulting force was terrifying. A loud whoom echoed, two immense forces canceling each other out. Ninetails didn't back down. Stubborn and fierce, she pumped in even more energy. Then cracks began to form in the magic shield. Its owner was instantly hit with backlash. The shield shattered with a deafening crack. Ninetails' flames surged like hellfire, blasting through the branches of the Tree of Life. The ancient being reeled in shock. The master's shield was destroyed, and just as it panicked, Xiaoling charged in from behind. Flames roared in her hands, her fury matching their blaze. She snarled, "Didn't you act high and mighty just a moment ago?" With that, she hurled the flames straight at the Tree of Life. The strike was vicious, perfectly aimed, but it couldn't sever the entire root. She was at the position for being the perfect target. "How dare you?" the Tree of Life bellowed. He lashed out a sharp root toward her. Meanwhile, Ninetails was still locked in an intense battle with the Lord. Two savage duels, but the noise from the Lord's side was louder. He slammed Ninetails down into the ground. Till then, he realized there was no impact. Nothing had moved. Ninetails floated graceful as a falling leaf, suspended in the air just inches from his snout, taunting him. Ninetails wasn't the joking type. The moment she saw her opponent realize he couldn't crush her, she slammed her head forward, ramming it right into the Lord, sending him skidding backward a long distance. The black dragon, having nothing better to do, muttered in awe, "Whoa, the Lord is being pushed back," like no one else had noticed if he hadn't pointed it out. The Lord's spider-like legs clamped down on the ground. He stared at Ninetails in disbelief, then suddenly burst into laughter. "Ha ha! You are strong indeed! If you were my subordinate, how wonderful it would be!" Then with a roar, bellowed, "Black Dragon! Tree, come here!" The moment the command was issued, the Tree of Life swatted Xiaoling away with a thick root, then retreated back to the Lord's side like an obedient dog, lodging himself silently waiting for orders. A surge of dark spiritual energy exploded without warning. The Lord snarled, "Using this body to fight has been inconvenient long enough. Now, I'll show you my true combat form." It was Black Dragon and the Tree of Life that changed first. Pillars of light burst from their forms, growing larger and brighter. Spiritual energy surged out in terrifying waves. Xiaoling, full of suspicion, noticed the energy from the tree was entirely different from before. In an instant, all that energy merged together and formed a massive column of light that shot straight up into the sky. It corroded the ground below, melting away several meters of earth. When the enormous pillar of energy faded, amidst the thick, smoky haze, a narrow, scheming eye appeared. Just as they thought the transformation was complete, another colossal surge of spiritual energy burst forth. It annihilated everything around it, blasting out with such force that Ninetails had to anchor her entire spirit form to the ground to avoid being flung away. Xiaoling could only press in beside her to keep from collapsing. Both of them knew whoever owned the eye lurking behind that black smoke was the bringer of the true, final battle. There would be no turning back. From the thick fog of dust and debris, a humanoid figure emerged, the shape eerily similar to their master. But his head was that of a dragon, his joints tinged, radiating dark spiritual energy and raw bloodlust. When the dragon's mouth opened, he let out a ferocious roar. The new form of the Lord was far smaller than before, but both Xiaoling and Ninetails immediately sensed the threat. There's no way it had gone through all that fusion just to shrink for showing off. He said with arrogant flair, "To honor your rebellious spirit, I shall fight you, using only 1/3 of my power." The tree's roots curled into a dense black mass, lashing toward the sisters. Ninetails roared, "Xiaoling," but didn't say more. The serious look on her face confused Xiaoling. They'd never fought side by side before, so how was she supposed to know what that look meant? Boom! A massive root slammed down on where they had just stood. It wasn't clear if Xiaoling had dodged in time, but Nine Tails burst from the smoke with mouth wide open. She spat a massive column of flames straight at the enemy, as if she meant to roast the Lord down to the bone. The target wasn't visible, but from the smoke, roots came stabbing in from all four directions. All of them pointed at Nine Tails, intent on skewering her like a pincushion. Really? Still using the same old move after all that fusion? Nine Tails scoffed. She lit up her entire body with spiritual energy, forming a massive protective barrier, and stood her ground, ready to take the hit head-on. But Nine Tails forgot the Lord was a slippery, deceitful type. The roots, once stiff and rigid, turned soft and whip-like in just a moment, lashing her so hard she coughed up blood on the spot. The surprise attack was brutally powerful. Nine Tails reeled in shock, but still, she held her fire shield firm around her body, refusing to give the enemy a second chance. The Lord opened his mouth, ready to blow a dark blast into Nine Tails' face, but too late. She had already activated Physique of Flames, merging her physical body and surrounding fire into one. Before the Lord could react, she charged at him like a blazing comet, a living fireball smashing straight into his face. Her flame body transformed into a burning sphere, completely engulfing his form until it looked like a sun had dropped from the sky. The area lit up so brightly, no one could see clearly. From the thinnest part of the fireball, something burst out. A figure. It was the big-mouthed the Lord himself. His body burned all over because the fire too intense, far beyond what he'd anticipated. Even the protective layer given by the Tree of Life now scorched like bark in a wildfire. His entire body couldn't block this heat. In front of him, Nine Tails' flames roared on relentless, scorching. She reformed her flame body and drove it forward, straight into his chest, giving him no time to react. Her flame claw slashed condensed spiritual energy into a brutal close-range strike. Wham! The Lord was flung backward like a rag doll, crashing into the ground with a thunderous shockwave, but that still wasn't enough to finish him. He sprang back up immediately, roaring loudly. "Is that all? I'm not afraid of." Of what? Nine Tails' face was already inches from his again, blasting another wave of flames right into his teeth. He had no time to gloat. The monstrous column of fire spread out like a tsunami of destruction, too wide to dodge. Meanwhile, Nine Tails wasn't underestimating him one bit. Her mouth bled heavily from the intense power output, yet she was already preparing another shot. This isn't over yet. She launched another pillar of flame, striking the Lord square in the body again, the blaze consuming him like hellfire. The only thing visible was his dragon mouth, screaming in pain, while the flames grew even wilder. Explosions rang through the sky from the sheer pressure. The ground itself melted, flowing like lava. Nine Tails looked down at the crater she had created, panting hard, but not daring to lower her guard. Why did it still feel like a faint spiritual energy was rising from beneath? Whoosh! A massive beam of spiritual force blasted straight up from the crater, startling Nine Tails. It was his power, the Lord's, but it didn't feel like an attack. She looked to the sky. A swirl of scattered fragments floated gently in the wind, gradually reassembling themselves into a partial fusion form. He had taken the hit, but still had impressive recovery ability. With every passing second, the Lord's body regenerated further. He raised his head to scan the surroundings. Oh, the place has turned into a sea of magma already? And that girl, she ran off? Smart choice. I really like your power, he grinned. So let me give you something in return. Instead of reforming his old shape, something strange sprouting from his extended left arm. That strange spiritual energy made Nine Tails' fur stand on end, watching to see what her enemy would pull next. Behind the Lord, a pitch-black spatial gate began to open, a gift especially for Nine Tails, as he smugly called it. Your grave. From the darkness reached out a massive hand, its cracked nails looking menacing and diseased. Next came a bulging eyeball, protruding grotesquely as it scanned the area, followed by a low, garbled muttering. And the moment it touched the ground, it charged forward with a deafening screech. Kek, 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 tore into the battlefield, a maddening howl that split the ears. Its eyeball, nestled disturbingly inside its mouth, gleamed with a paralyzing light. And in just a blink, Nine Tails felt her body freeze up, locked in place by its gaze. One moment of vulnerability, and the enemy struck with a devastating punch, slamming straight through her chest, lifting her completely off the ground. The Lord scoffed with a mocking smirk. All that power, and you still fell to my ultimate weapon. Nine Tails could clearly feel herself impaled, Egg. But why hadn't she fallen? Her mind was perfectly sharp. My body got struck, but there is no blood. Why was I unable to move just now? The beast let out a crazed shriek. Its claw, still skewering Nine Tails, suddenly yanked forward, trying to drag something out of her. Wait, not her physique form. She hadn't even activated that again. I'll extract your soul, the Lord declared from behind, and seal it inside this gate. Your body will become a puppet for me to control. I'll gift you a new soul and make you a new god. Ninetails understood instantly, and her rage ignited. Don't even think about it. Whoosh! A spherical field of sealing energy burst forth, enveloping everyone inside, including her enemies. Inside this field, Ninetails lost her access to spiritual power. So did her enemies. The Lord's smug face twisted when he realized the spiritual energy was dissipating. No matter how twisted his techniques were, he still needed spiritual energy to use them. Without it, the giant freak from the gate began stuttering, its movements jerky like a puppet with snapped strings. Ninetails wasted no time. She summoned her flame claw slash and launched a lightning-fast strike. This body isn't yours to command. Got it? Her claw sliced clean through the monster's arm, freeing her in one decisive blow. The Lord was stunned. This was the first time he'd seen such a thing, not only losing Ninetails' soul, but getting cursed out in the process. Inside my spiritual lockdown field, Ninetails snarled, no one can use any spiritual power. Let's see what tricks you've got left now. Flames surged once again from Ninetails' throat. She hated this dirty, underhanded way of fighting. All she wanted now was to end this and walk away victorious. But the more she unleashed her power, the more thrilled the Lord became. You're making me want you more and more. Whip. Roots lashed out at blinding speed, wrapping tightly around Ninetails, crushing her fire mid-cast. They squeezed her so tightly that she tried several times to summon her flames again, but nothing came. Damn it! These cursed roots could absorb spiritual power. The Lord twisted the roots even harder, trying to snap Ninetails in half. But instead, he was hit by the full force of her retaliatory strength. The two forces clashed, roots snapped and scattered like twigs. Ninetails suffered heavy backlash herself, coughing up a mouthful of blood and tumbling backward from the impact. Frustrated, she summoned all her strength, swung a blazing flame claw slash at the enemy, landing a clean hit. But in return, the Lord slapped her so hard that her head nearly twisted sideways. Through the blood-soaked blur of her vision, Ninetails managed to send a single, crystal-clear message. Son of the beach. She gave up her body's defense just to hit me back? The Lord had never met anything as suicidal as Ninetails. He was determined to crush that defiance. He summoned a long, whip-like root, brought it crashing down like a cane of steel. Ninetails howled in pain, her body slamming into the ground with a brutal thud. Above, the Lord unleashed a barrage of roots, chasing her mercilessly. They twisted into a massive bundle and came crashing down where she'd fallen. Ninetails, having abandoned her defense in favor of all-out offense, couldn't dodge in time. The impact was devastating. Her lower half was completely torn away, blood soaked into the dark earth. Seeing her like that filled the Lord with delight. He raised his roots high, forming a sphere of spiritual energy, stuffing something inside it that crackled with deadly sparks. You enjoyed that little fight, didn't you? He sneered. Well, now it's my turn to have some fun. He unleashed his signature move, Dragon Roar Shell, a devastating projectile powered by the Tree of Life's energy and launched with the velocity of a dragon's roar. Its target was what was left from Ninetails' body, a shot meant to leave no chance of resurrection. The Dragon Roar Shell screamed through the air, almost at Ninetails. Then her jaw twitched, her teeth clenched, her eyes snapped open just half a meter from impact. Boom! The shell hit, carving a crater into the earth, incinerating everything below rank 4. The Lord stood tall, admiring the aftermath, eager to see the last scraps of Ninetails' remains. But surprise, Ninetails, nearly untouched, shot right through the lingering flames, dashing at lightning speed straight toward him. She looked exhausted, but she didn't stop for a second. She launched a fire twister point blank at his face. The Lord scoffed. What? This pathetic little trick again. Just some ragged attack I can block with a few roots. Indeed, the move seemed smaller than before. But after the strike, Ninetails was nowhere to be found. He looked around, and suddenly from behind, her flaming tail wrapped tightly around his entire body. What's this supposed to do? Tie me up like this? Ninetails leaned in close and whispered into his ear. I've dragged this out long enough. Before he could react, she roared, Shaoling! At that moment, even the dumbest observer could tell everything Ninetails had done up to now was to buy time. The Lord turned in shock to see that human girl appear nearby, panting heavily, but her eyes blazing with purpose. Sorry for the wait, Ninetails. She'd hidden it up in the clouds all along. No wonder the Lord hadn't noticed. Won't you be affected too? He sneered, eyeing the bloody, broken Ninetails behind him. You'd got me wrapped up just so you both can take the hit together, right? That's right. Ninetails said coldly, but fire can't hurt me. The words had barely left her mouth when the Lord, panicked, stabbed her violently. He knew whatever technique that human girl was preparing, it wasn't something he could afford to take head on. No, you're not getting away. Ninetails, stubborn to the end, refused to let go even as more holes began to open up across her body. There wasn't a second to waste. Xiaoling gave the order for the fire dragon she had forged came roaring down from the sky. Mouth wide open, it aimed to swallow everything. And in that very instant, a flash of pure terror sparked in the Lord's eyes. The fire dragon's jaws clamped shut with such force that sparks exploded in all directions, tearing up the land wherever they touched. If the flames on the outside were already that devastating, then what kind of inferno raged inside that dragon's throat? Roughly a minute and a half earlier, when the Lord saw little Xiaoling charging forward with a massive fire dragon in tow, he felt genuine panic for the first time. This wasn't going to end well. If that hit landed, what would become of him? Xiaoling didn't hesitate, not for a second. A moment's delay, and Ninetails would have fallen. From the instant the dragon's jaws clamped down, it took less than 3 seconds for the Lord to feel that unbearable heat wrap him in an iron grip. His eyes bulged in disbelief while his whole body was dragged downward at blinding speed. As the fire dragon dove headfirst into the earth, dragging him and countless other things with it. Amid the blinding light, one by one, everything was reduced to ash. The destructive force from the dragon's maw spread outward with terrifying speed until a thunderous explosion rocked the entire region, annihilating several kilometers in all directions. Even the sky seemed about to tear open. After unleashing that, Xiaoling collapsed onto a rocky ledge nearby, gasping desperately for air. It felt like if she missed even a half breath, she'd suffocate and die right then and there. She had never in her life used power at that scale, and never faced an enemy this monstrous. But the heat still radiating, the thick smoke still rising, was telling her one thing. She had achieved everything she needed to. The ground below was an ocean of fire, spreading like lava from a volcanic crater. Xiaoling's mind began to drift. She couldn't even stand. Staggering forward, she fell off the edge of the ledge. For a superhuman like her, a fall like that shouldn't have mattered. But before she hit the ground, Ninetails' soft, fluffy tail gently caught her in midair. Just that little touch was enough to jolt Xiaoling awake. Hey, you look pretty banged up, huh? Ninetails smiled calmly. No big deal. Once we get back, Master will fix me right up. But Xiaoling's gaze drifted. My teammates, they're all gone. Life and death are predestined. There's no one to blame. Ninetails answered. The two of them landed quietly on a rocky outcrop, looking down at the blazing sea of magma below. Even she had to admit, an attack like that made her proud of Xiaoling. Let's go home. Ninetails invited her gently. They definitely deserved a long vacation. Just when it seemed like everything had ended on a good note, a voice dripping with hatred pierced the air. None of you are leaving alive. Who else could it be but the lingering nightmare himself? The Lord had returned for blood. Ninetails and Xiaoling instantly felt their skin crawl. They turned just in time to see a beam of light rocketing straight toward them. Xiaoling could vaguely hear Ninetails shouting, "Watch out!" Ninetails threw herself in front, taking the full brunt of the attack. To Xiaoling, it felt like a massive club had slammed into her heart. Her mind buzzed, and despair hit hard. "Ninetails!" she screamed, clutching the fox's mouth, now slightly agape, her expression fading as if life was slipping away. "Go, Xiaoling, go!" That was all Ninetails could manage. Her weak voice swallowed by the roaring energy. Rose from the flames, the Lord staring down at the two. "You will all die here." He raised one claw razor sharp and brought it down straight toward Xiaoling. She couldn't move, and took that blow meant her life would be end here. But then, clang! A deafening clash rang out as something struck the claw and knocked it back. A wave of familiar energy hit surging close. Xiaoling's eyes went wide as she saw the one who arrived. Even the Lord was stunned. He hadn't even sensed his arrival. A dark spirit elf? No, it was him. Zuizu had blocked the attack for Xiaoling. His face was darker than a thundercloud, like death itself. 1 second later, his precious daughter would have been gone. "Master!" Xiaoling choked, tears welling up in her eyes. She called to him with a trembling voice, but couldn't speak beyond that. The Lord blinked in confusion. A dark spirit elf blocked his strike? No, that wasn't right. That was mutant tree. Zuizu didn't bother with a reply. He simply summoned a rain of life essence, drenching Xiaoling and Ninetails, restoring their strength in an instant. Ninetails stood up, wanting to position herself next to her master, only for him to shoot her a sharp glare. Retreat. The command was cold and clear. Before it was even fully spoken, The Lord had already conjured a black orb as disgusting as dung and hurled it toward his enemy. Don't even think about it. Thunder control. A massive bolt of lightning crashed down on the Lord's head like a slap in the face, snapping him back to his senses. The fierce spiritual energy didn't harm him, but it pinned him down long enough for the nine tails to break free from the battlefield. Long time no see. The Lord considered that his way of saying hello, but it only made Ziyu hate him even more. I was only gone for a little while, and you've already turned this place upside down. Oh no, this is just the appetizer, he sneered. Sensing Zuyizu's spiritual energy rising sharply, his irritation grew obvious. Next, I'm going to tear that mouth of yours apart and make you spill everything about the great emperor. Wishful thinking, the Lord roared back. From beneath, the sea of lava surrounding them surged up like towering walls encircling Zuyizu, even though he hadn't lifted a finger. His elemental control was overwhelming, even stunning the Lord. More importantly, Zuyizu wasn't fighting this battle alone. He had the azure dragon, the axe serpent, and the true form of the willow tree had already descended to this planet.